Today, as we continue to unravel this whole incarnation mystery and living all that, I remember as I talk most of the time, I have a lot of interesting Facebook feeds that I get, or jokes that I get. And one of them that I remember is, there is the picture of the nativity set. They're in there in the manger. And it says, instead of 3 wise men, 3 wise women, bringing diapers, baby formula, and clean clothes. And I was reflecting on that a little bit and how we could interpret things differently and going forward. And as Father Jack and I, we share a magazine called The Priest, and it has a lot of interesting articles on faith and how we could take care of ourselves and what we should do preaching and all that. And one of the articles that he read and I read and we started talking about it was one on preaching. What do we do every week when we preach? How do we share our faith? And part of this article that was on preaching talked about how we need to prepare as priests when we share our faith, that we just don't get up and babble. Even though it may sound like it to you, we actually do prepare. Going through, and one of the things it said was, well, one of the things of preparation should be is you should read the scripture, let it set, think about it. The second part is then you should then go to commentaries and see what other people who study the scripture say. And I subscribe to a thing online from the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops, and they have daily homilies and all this. And the one for this week, actually, and I can't say these are all my ideas coming through, although that helped me form it. It was actually a reflection by a Franciscan who said, the Pope did a homily on this day, Francis. And it was interesting because I was kind of turning some stuff around, and it said, the Pope invites us on the feast of this 3 Kings to reflect on our faith journey. How is it, of people of faith, that we could identify with the journey that the 3 kings made? And the first part of that journey was a realization that something's happening in the world. There's something breaking in. They saw the star and they got off of their thrones and they started to travel, to move, to walk, to experience the whole rigmarole of traveling in that time. They began a mission. We could even call it a pilgrimage, looking for something that they studied and knew that was going to change the world. And then when they got to the place where they thought it was going to be, one of the things that they did was they questioned. Where is he? Does anybody know about him? Did anybody hear about him? And if we think about that, at times, we shouldn't be afraid to question our faith or get into dialogue about faith issues. We should be people who are willing to try to understand how the Lord is working in our lives and how the Lord works in others in life, and how could we dialogue with one another. Then when they get to Herod, and they're with Herod, they're kind of a little bit, because probably their stature, even though he invited them to tell them where Jesus was living and all, and going through that and where it is, and because at the end of the scripture they were talked about the warning in a dream and not going back, and the reflection on when they didn't obey the King Herod to come back and tell him where it was. The Pope takes a really interesting, I thought, I never would have thought of this idea. Basically, they said no to Herod. How do we as people of faith begin to say no and try to change those who are destructive in the world? Those who foster war, those who keep people in trafficking for human trafficking, those who are not just in the businesses that they do. How is it that we as people of faith are going to stand up and say no to the Herods in our society? And what does that mean for us to make that type of commitment going forward? That, if anything, really had impacted me when I heard that. I had to actually stop and I was thinking, God, how am I doing that, and how much more I need to do? Then when they found the child, they began to homage him. that silent moment when they saw the scene? How is it that in our lives, through all of our celebrations, that we take time to be silent and allow that incarnation to take flesh in us, to take time out to pray, and to link all those other things so far as what we did, that we got up and traveled, we prepared for Christmas, we questioned our faith, and we tried to learn about it. We know we need to be good in society and make changes and work towards changes, but we can't do that unless we're grounded in that presence, that, and I'll say it in a sense, that baby presence in the world, that when everybody sees a baby, there is peace and tranquility. And then we say, we have to make sure that this baby grows and develops and grows into something special. And then they make a move. By not going back to Herod, they return to their lands, and that is how do we then begin to put into practice the mysteries we celebrate week after week? How do we then begin to live as people infused with the incarnation, having an experience of that Lord that in a sense calls us to be better people, calls us to reconcile within our families, to question and be present, so that we indeed have in our world an incarnate Lord that we know will suffer, die, and rise for us, and we're called to follow him.